All right, time for some desert reflections. Get a chance to share some thoughts I've had this week. The number one thought that just keeps coming on in my mind. I feel very passionately about this particular topic, and it's also easily misunderstood. So bear with me a little bit. The topic is consistency. Um, you've probably said it, heard it, expressed it, thought about it more than you want to imagine, right? The idea is that if I'm consistent in my behavioral responses to my child, that consistency will have the desired effect of essentially training my child to comply, behave, learn, grow, etc. A few problems with this. One problem with this is that consistency it essentially means that we need to be perfect. Because if I'm going to be consistent, I have to follow through every time, do it the exact same way, and never mess up. So consistency itself is a fallacy. There is no such thing as consistency in human behavior. So I think we need to be really careful with that term when we throw it around because it is truly impossible. You cannot be consistent. You cannot be perfect. You cannot get everything right every time. Even if you just imagine all the different variables that go into getting it right, right? Your tone, your timing, your words, your behavior, your body posturing, whatever it might be, really, to think about consistency. But I think the term comes from trying to train animals. And it's an old behavioral construct that says, we need to essentially treat people like animals and train them into doing what we want by rewards and punishments. And if we use rewards and punishments, then that will get people to comply or do what we want them to do. The issue is this doesn't really, first of all, it doesn't help individuals learn how to think on their own. It doesn't help them grow into mature adults. And with people versus animals, it can lead to two extremes, right? The reactive extreme, the extreme where someone is fighting all the time to resist this control. And the other extreme is where someone learns to be trained by you and they don't think on their own and they're not able to launch into adulthood. Now, having said this, I'm going to contradict myself as I believe in living in the paradox because there are elements of consistency that matter. Following through, right, matters. Even then, you're not going to be consistent at all the time, but I think follow through is an important concept. Knowing that I'm not going to get it perfect, but trying to follow through with what I say and what my intentions are. And if I say I'm going to show up at a certain time, my kids need to learn how to trust that I'm going to do that. Follow through with my promises. What that means is I need to be careful of my promises and not make promises that don't fit. This concept, side note, really important in wilderness, right? Where a parent will think, well, I'll see you next week, or I'll see you soon. Better term. I'll see you soon, and the kid interprets next week when we think we'll see you in a month. In other words, we're not thinking about it from their perspective. So follow through and promises need to be seen from the perspective of our children, not from our perspective on what we think the follow through should be or could be. I think follow through is important with consistency. I think patterns are important with consistency. Routine is important. Rituals are important. All those things are important. Once again, you're not going to get them perfect, but those are things we want to try and do our best at, and making sure that we do have structure and routine and patterns because that helps kids learn how to eventually establish those for themselves. And if they are too rigid, then it teaches that kids can't have flexibility within the structure either. That's why another fallacy with the consistency is it can turn into rigidity as well. And as human beings, we have to learn how to be flexible and to adjust and adapt based on the circumstances that are presented to us. I think the other barrier with consistency is it starts to get us thinking that is actually the highest order priority, when we know that the highest order priority is the relationship. I think that's been the error of, for too long, that people have tried to adapt animal concepts and training to people and haven't realized it, and don't realize how common those beliefs are that exists in our interactions with each other as people and our children, and then the shame we carry when we're not able to follow through and do exactly what we were supposed to do. Last thing is to know yourself. Once again, back up, one more issue with consistency is every decision that I make as a parent has to be considered. Like, it's not, I can't necessarily carry over from what I did yesterday to today. Now, principles do follow. There are some common principles we follow, but there's a lot of decisions that are going to be different from day to day. That's why we can't necessarily be consistent, because the moment, the situation, the needs are different. Now, the danger with that thinking has to do with your own style, who you are. So if you're a super rigid person that's actually extremely consistent and you don't have any flexibility, then you're going to be one that's going to spend more time considering every decision in order to practice being flexible and understanding the situation, the circumstances, the emotions, everything else. If you're a person that is what we would traditionally have called permissive, I don't necessarily like the term, but we're going to use that because it's a shorthand to understand what I'm saying, then you're going to have to think more, lean more in the consistency, right? You're going to have to practice more of, okay, I got to follow through, more than considering every situation to be unique and different and sending, mixed messages to my child. But that's based on your own personality, right? It just depends on what your own struggle is. I mean, some people are born just kind of naturally in, not having one extreme or the other. Instead, they have they recognize that both of those worlds are kind of a strength for them. That's great if you're the one of those. But for most of us, we're having to kind of practice the other side a little bit. And in practicing, sometimes we make more mistakes because we're learning a skill, and that's okay. Don't put the consistency shame on your head, because it just isn't. It isn't reality, and it isn't possible. It's not something I don't think that you can strive for. Follow through, clarity. I mean, there's a lot of other really beautiful constructs that work a lot better than the idea of consistency to help us in our ever-growing, forever pattern of trying to understand how to work with our children, and especially those that are having more emotional and neurodevelopmental struggles, and how important it is to practice some of these really nuanced ideas in their lives. Had a great week in the field this week. Tried to establish some new patterns with hiking. Was able to hike with a group, and so we did a lot of in vivo group therapy discussions, trying to understand their own flexibility, and recognizing that if the more as a human being I allow other people to be flexible and don't hold them to that, then the more they're able to be flexible and work with me to meet my needs. Because sometimes kids, once again, because they're human, and sometimes because that we've treated them like training, like rewards and punishment consequences, that when they get a break, right, and we're flexible with them, they then think to manipulate that break instead of being grateful for the break or the understanding or the compassionate act done in their favor to help support them. And what a beautiful thing is people, right? And this happens often in marriages and relationships and partnerships and whatever, is that if I can't flex and allow someone else to be flexible and understanding with me, and then bounce back and not expect them to do it, right? If for example, my responsibility is the filling of the dishwasher often in my household, and if someday I'm having a hard time or somebody's struggling and somebody fills it for me, if I start expecting them to keep filling it for me, obviously I'm going to ruin the relationship. And we want kids to understand that it's okay to receive a gift and an understanding moment. And that's where, once we get back to the consistency idea, if we're too much in that, then we teach them that that's not the case, a rigid view of relationships. So we discussed that kind of stuff, and just had a great week. I think the group is in a really good place right now, and I'm excited for the future. As we have transitions, some kids leaving and some new kids coming in, and it's a beautiful time. May is a common transition time for groups, and excited for the culture and the expectation. We established some new group pillars, and we talked about flexibility, acceptance, resiliency, and empathy, and how important those are for our group, and how much we want to practice those on a regular basis. As a foundation for what we do. So as always, appreciate you. Thanks for being so supportive and understanding. Have a wonderful week. Good luck with all the stuff going on in the world, and hope this helps out a little bit. And we're thinking of you. Thanks.